I see all familiar faces, so I'm glad that you're still with us and attending our Parent Academy. We have a good lineup for this year. We do have our session tonight on the Common Core. Our session on December 2nd is over on the parks and specifically interpreting the reports. So right now, the reports are due back, student reports on sometime the last week of November. Hopefully we have all of those so that you have a chance to look at your student's report before the December meeting. That's my plan. If not, we're still going to go forward with an example of a report and go over all the pieces because the reports do look very different from the NJ Ask report. So please ask your friends, neighbors, anyone who might be interested to come because I'd like everyone to be able to understand all of the information that are now in those reports. In January, we have a joint venture with our CPAC, which our Director of Special Services, Grace, is here. And it's going to be based on working with struggling learners, but having a variety of strategies to help any kind of learner. We're going to have a presentation specifically on dyslexia. We're also going to have a breakout session on our BSI and our intervention referral services. So you'll have a chance to hear what do we offer in Denville, and if you have a struggling learner, whether they have a learning disability or they're struggling in class, what are the programs we offer, both general education and special education, to get them on track. And that'll be in January. Our February meeting is focused on the next generation of science standards. So just like we have the Common Core standards for language arts and math, we now have a set of science standards which really go into more depth. We have fewer topics per year, but for longer periods of time. So each grade level, K through 5, has about 4 main topics that they study, so pretty much 1 a quarter. In earth science, life science, physical science, and then in engineering. So that's mixed in. And middle school has the same, but they kind of overlap and are more integrated for those things. So our elementary students already have a new science program that they're using this year called Knowing Science, but you're going to have an opportunity to learn a lot more about that program at our February meeting. And then our last meeting of the year, we moved it back because last year we really coincided with the spring sports, and that was so difficult. So this year we're ending in March before we really hit all of those extracurricular activities. And the last one for the year will be specifically on Reading and Writing Workshop, which is the program and the philosophy that we follow K to 5 in reading and writing. And I know there are many questions about how it works with our report cards, and what does it look like in the classroom. So we'll have teachers that will be demonstrating what this looks like and give you a lot of examples of what a student's day looks like during the workshop time. So a good lineup for us this year. Just a quick recap. I came out early and checked this a lot of times to make sure it worked. Okay, that's the next one. Just to recap from last year why we have the Parent Academy. In general, the whole idea is that it's a singular focus of student achievement. So there's a lot of different aspects of the school that we work through, whether it's fundraising or climate and culture, or cultural arts. But this particular organization is just to get feedback from parents, which we really did use. We redesigned our expo and our Gifted and Talented and Enrichment program this year based on the feedback that we had last year from our meeting. So we took that data and we used it. So it's a time to ask questions, but also a time to get input so that we can actually make a difference in the way that the offerings that we roll out to our kids. And at the the mission is really to improve our homeschool communication and the offerings that we have here. So I think we'll just all work together on this one, but I really want to hear just some feedback on what you've heard in the media or things that you've heard about Common Core that maybe we can address. So what are, like, when you turn on the news and you keep hearing Common Core, what are the things that we're hearing? Because you're tired of hearing that.
And I know 9/10 of anything that comes out of the news is either wildly circumcised or not true.
Nice, skewed data.
They say the federal government is telling us teachers what to do in the classroom. That's too much control for us.
Did you hear that? It's a federal curriculum.
Right.
Federal curriculum. Did you hear any successes? Have you heard anything about any successes? Or maybe your own experience?
Who is the Common Core vice versa? Or something.
I hear that.
Just that it's more focused on critical thinking, in general, rather than memorization.
One thing I've heard a lot this year was when the governor came out and said that we weren't going to do Common Core. I heard that a lot. And then all of a sudden, you know, in every meeting I was at, they were reassuring. So I've met with the assistant commissioner a few times now, and they keep reassuring. And just so that everybody is clear, we get to our changes. Isn't that nice? That should clear us. To work. We're going to talk about what really is changed.
Like it or not, life is full of measuring sticks. How smart we are, how fast we are, how far we can, compete. But up until now, it's been pretty hard to tell how well kids are being in school and how well they're going to do when they get out of school. We like to think that our education system does that. But when it comes to learning what they really need to be successful at, Dawn as much as her friend over in the next one is a graduating senior in, say, St. Louis
that's just the overview about why we have state standards. The idea is that we have these common standards for all the states that are participating. Originally there were 47, I think we're down to about 44. And although some of them may be doing the PART test, they may be doing another set of tests that California does, it's all based upon the Common Core. And even though some of the states have decided they were not going to participate in the Common Core, if you look at the standards, I mean, they're very general, that they just took the standards and when it said like, students have to cite evidence, then it's, students will use evidence when citing things. And in fact, there's some lawsuits about that because all the states that put their money in for it are saying, wait a second, you don't just get to use them and say you're now your own state. And we all put it in. But really, there's really not a lot of room, or there is a lot of room to decide what each standard is about. So it's hard to say in a different way, you know, when it's a specific skill with that. So really, why do we have them? We're hoping that they all set clear standards. Now, New Jersey is typically in the top 3 states. It's Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. And we take turns. Sometimes we're top first, sometimes we're third, but we're always right in those top particular states. So this really has not been a big surprise for us with these standards, and the way that they've rolled out in classrooms hasn't been really that different than what we experienced in the past. They were adopted in 2010, but really started to get notoriety when the PARC assessment came on, or the Better Balanced test in California came on. Then a lot of the states were saying, oh, wait a second, what were these Common Core standards about? So that really talked about what the assessment was more than what the standards were talking about. Designed from the input by college and professionals to say, what should your freshmen know coming into school or in a trade? And the biggest thing was really the writing. That's probably the biggest difference, that our students weren't able to write. And what I'm hearing, and I'm glad, is that the high school is telling us that in the last couple of years, our students are reading and writing better. So for me, that's a great benchmark. Whatever else we know, I ask the high school, how are our students coming to you? Are they doing a better job at being prepared at the level that you're expecting them to do? I actually did a survey, took all of the data from freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors from last year. I looked at all the courses that they took and every grade that they got for the end of the year to see, well, how well were they doing in the courses, the kids from Denville, how well did they do? And for the most part, they almost, whatever level they were in, whatever they were placed in, were getting A's and B's, a handful of C's, but I could count on one hand how many F's. It was almost non-existent. In some grades, there were 0 F's. Now, that could be for whatever reason. Either we're doing a great job placing them, they're better prepared, or great inflation, I'm not sure. But whatever the case may be, whatever they're doing in the high school, they're having success. So the students that are in AP English are getting A's and B's, and the students that are in PBA, CPB, all of those beginning levels are also getting A's and B's. So we are having success, and to me that's important to know, whether it's based on a test or not. Are they able to perform in those? Some of the myths you brought up, I just want to address. The standards tell teachers what to think and what to teach. Well, it does give us a good guideline, but know that there's a lot of room for interpretation. And I think where the controversy really lies is in how the standards are interpreted. So after last year's presentation, we had a large group, and what came out, one of the comments was that we only heard the positives. Well, there must be something wrong. But I really do feel like the controversy is centered around 2 factors. One, the assessment. People are either not happy with the assessment, the number of assessments, the way that people are practicing, the interpretation of the teachers and how they're rolling it out, but also the materials that they're using. So they may not be happy with the math program that the district is using. So let's say they've chosen everyday math, and they don't like the everyday math program. Well, that's not really about the standards, because the standards do not say what math program to use. But the parents are like, well, we don't like this newfangled math, we don't know how to do it, and we're not really fond of this program. That's another thing. That's a great conversation to have with your district. So what we're using for math is different from what Rockaway is using and what Denville, what Randolph is using. Everybody's using something different because it does not tell us what to use. It does not tell us which novels to read, or some of the grade levels in some of the districts use anthologies or short stories to teach language arts. We in this district use novels, short stories, and trade books to teach language arts. So it really differs, and I think that's where the controversy comes, because I've seen a lot about, the biggest one I've seen about is the math. Because they're saying, well, my child's been told they can only do the math using this method, and it's not the way I learned, and I don't like it, and so the Common Core is not, but we don't like the Common Core. But the Common Core just says the students need to be able to do their facts fluently, kindergarten 0 to 5, first grade 0 to 10. It doesn't tell you if you need to do Go Math, or Envision Math, or Math and Focus, everyday math, traditional math. You can use anything to accomplish that goal. It's really up to the district. So those towns that are not liking that, whatever they're doing or having concerns, definitely should go to the district or this type of forum and discuss. If you're not happy, or you hear your friends aren't happy with the way that we're doing math, that's a conversation about maybe Envision Math isn't meeting the needs of Denville students, and that's a good conversation to have. But it really isn't about the standard itself. The other thing in math is the interpretation. So when the first one came out, statement down here. In the math, one of them was having conceptual understanding. It's in one of your handouts. And it talks about the number of perspectives. So you're supposed to understand how to do a math problem from multiple ways, like different ways. Like you could do 10 plus 8, you could add it up. You could put 10 and then an 8 and do it long math that way. Or you could say 18 is close to 20, 20 plus 8 is 28, and do it in your head that way, the estimations. So that's another way of doing that problem. When it was first interpreted, in 2010 when they came out, a lot of school districts told children, and many of the math programs, you have to learn all of these methods, and then I'm going to test you on do you know the method. And that was not the intent of the standard. The standard was, there's lots of ways you can do these problems. You might do it with long division. You might do it by estimating. You might do it by combining in groups and counting in there. And all of them are great. At the end of the day, whether it's on our Envision test, which we do beginning, middle, and end of the year, it doesn't matter. You can do any way. You're not graded on what method you use. So on your report card, it's not about the method. And on the park, it's not about the method. They don't give you a problem and say, here's the problem, and you must solve it by this particular method. So it really is, it's a bubble, and you pick the right answer in the end. But I know that there's a lot of controversy because, and I can't deny that there probably are districts, and maybe even this district at a time, we're interpreting it that they have to know the method more than how to do the math. And so they're interpreting that standard as being knowing different methods of math means you know I have to memorize all the different ways. So as we've learned, as educators, as we've learned and become more comfortable, we're realizing you gotta be a little more loose with the terminology here. It's not intended to be that type of thing. So back to those myths. So to me, that's probably where there's the controversy. There's a lot of confusion and probably valid. How I was watching on YouTube, watching different places in Arkansas and coming up and reporting to their school boards what the problems were, and looking at, well, what is the issue? And one of them was like the math problem, saying my child was penalized because they got the right answer, but they didn't do it the right method. And that should not happen. If it ever does in Denville, please let the building administration know, and we know, because I've repeatedly told them that's not how we interpret it. Or it's the book, that they have to know this book, and that's not it either. There's no set of books or anthologies or anything that we're supposed to use. It could be any book to use to do the skills. We also can add local flavor. So the idea about it being a federal curriculum, every state can add up to 20% more standards if they want. That's up to the state. New Jersey hasn't added any because they haven't found a standard that they wanted to add, but maybe they will. You can add 20%. We can add whatever we want. This is just a minimum. If we wanted to teach, we said everybody in Denville is going to do these X, Y, and Z, we can. It's up to us. So what's new? Right now, when the governor came out to say that they were looking and reviewing the standards. This is actually not about the controversy with the Common Core. We review standards every 5 years. And it's now 2015, and we adopted them in 2010, so we would be reviewing them no matter what. A review process involves parents, educators, college professors. I mean, it's a huge group. People can apply to be on this group. Parents and educators and anyone in the community had an opportunity to actually put in a survey, go on the web and look through the actual standards and say, I think this was misplaced because it's too difficult for first grade, or I think that this, I really like this standard, my students worked a lot with this one. You can say anything you wanted. They're taking all of that data in January to see if we need any clarification of the standards. So they are not going to change any of the standards or eliminate any standards, but they might clarify. They might put some verbiage in to make it a little clearer of what is expected at what grade level. And that process has been happening. The survey process ended in October. They're now meeting, and in January they're supposed to have it completed. In February they're going to the state school board to say, here's our review. We recommend these changes. And then the state school board says yes or no, and they either go back to the drawing board or it's accepted. But as of right now, the standards that existed last year are exactly the standards that exist this year. The part that tests that we will take at the end of April and May are going to be based on the standards that already exist because the test is already written. Okay, so there won't be anything different from the test types of questions that they did last year to this year. We'll talk a little bit about the part changes in a moment. The interpretation, I think we're getting better because, like I said, I think a lot of the controversy centered around the fact how it was interpreted and how teachers were rolling out, how people like myself were writing curriculum. Maybe it wasn't what the community was expecting. I think now we're a lot clearer after 5 years of doing this. We're better at delivering the true point of the standards and what is expected at which grade level. So not too high, not too low, making it rigorous, but not beyond what the students can do. The changes, and I'm going to do more on our December meeting, but just to know what's different about the part this year is that last year we did it over 2 weeks. The intent was that they would do the writing early enough that they would get it all scored and we would get it back, and then they would do the multiple choice portion in the later spring, and it would just combine to be one score. What's different is that from all the feedback, and really it wasn't feedback from our part assessment, it was the feedback from the pilot part, which we did participate in. They had already made the decision before we took the part in the spring that this was already going to be changed, because they based it on our feedback as the pilot, that it was too long. It was very difficult, not so long for the kids, but it was a lot of work to get it all into the computers. And then as soon as we got everybody through, we were starting again. Like as soon as we got all the grades through, we had to start again with, not that the individual student was taking it so long, but for as test administrators, for us it was like 8 or 9 weeks of constantly reloading kids. Now let's put the next class in, let's put the next class. So the individual student wasn't so impacted as it was challenging for us to make sure, is everything set, does everything work? So for now, it is about 8.25 hours total of testing. We found that last year, our students took about 2/3 of the given time. Even students who had the accommodation to have more time, very few of them went beyond, and most of them actually took it within the time. So it was, even though they had 8.25 hours to do it, most of them did not take that long, especially on the math. They went much faster on the math than we expected. The writing, some of them were done, but we were like, sure, you really look at it. So give them the extra time to go back. So that changed. The other change that are coming in part is that last time you sort of had to read it you were writing in a small box. It's probably about like this big on a screen. But now you'll be able to pull it up, and when you edit it, you read the whole thing together. So you're not like scrolling down and trying to remember, which I think will be helpful. So they've made some good changes to the assessment. I think the best is that it's all going to be in 1 week. It will be done for each grade level within 4 days, and it will only be from the beginning of the day to lunch. It will be done before lunch. so a couple hours a day. Like an hour and a half a day of testing. So it's not going to be too bad. It's actually less than NJS, so we're kind of used to that. So I want to hit on some new information for you. So you all came last year, you know the basics, some new things. If you look at the standards, there's basically 10 standards under each one, and they're called anchor standards. And in the anchor standards, it's very general. So here's like an example of reading. So there are 4 parts to the anchor standards. You can see they're very general. So kids have to be able to look at key ideas and details, the craft and structure, right? So then we're talking about like conventions. Are they using proper grammar and vocab and spelling, and those come in a little bit there. The integration of knowledge and ideas, and then the range of text complexity. So our students asked to read more complex informational text and not just narrative and fictional writing, a variety of things. I gave you an example of what does this actually look like in practice. So if you take out the handout that says example standard for reading, to give you an idea. So the standard itself is pretty lengthy. It says, this long verbiage about reading closely to determine what the text says explicitly, to make logical inferences from it, cite specific textual evidence when writing or speaking to support conclusions drawn from the text. So that long statement goes under this first one of key ideas and details. So what does it mean? It means we're going to ask the students, what does the text say? What does it not say? What does it mean, and how can you prove it? It looks differently by each grade level, and so I've kind of mapped it out. What would we expect kindergarten through 8th grade? So for a kindergartner, let's say we were reading the book Goldilocks. With prompting and support, we're going to ask them questions to recall. Who's the character? What is her name? When she went in, did she, what kind of seat did she sit in? We're just prompting them to get them to start retelling us, what did you hear in the story? By 1st grade, we start to have them come up with more details, and we might start asking them, why do you think that Goldilocks picked the small bed? And they might tell you, it was the most comfortable, it was the right size. So the kids are starting to ask questions about that, about the book. In 2nd grade, we start to get more details. We want them to know not just some of the main ideas, but like who, what, where, when, and why. The whole character, who's the character, what's the setting, what's the moral of the story. What do you think Goldilocks was feeling when the bears came home and she was there? We start to elicit more conversation like that. So you get deeper thoughts, so they can start inferring beyond what's just written in the text. So K and 1 it's more textual. We do ask them, it's amazing. You'd be amazed at what thoughts kindergartners and 1st graders come up with. I mean, their ideas are always going. So this is not challenging for them. They come up with this, and they come up with better questions far beyond what the standard says. They come up with, well, why did she break into their house anyway? I've heard kindergartners say those types of things. Why didn't she knock it when nobody answered? Why didn't she leave? Kindergartners are funny, they're the best to go into. They'll come up with all sorts of things. By 3rd grade, we really expect them to start drawing in their answers and saying why, using the text. So at this point, they're definitely getting into more complex text, little meatier morals and little meatier plots, so that they can start thinking beyond the basics. They can say, why was the character feeling that way? What evidence in the story made you think that she was Goldilocks, but Goldilocks was scared? Do you see anything in there? Oh, she ran out of the room screaming, and they have to pull out more from the story and back what they said. And then we just get some more detail as they get to 4th grade. They have to summarize it, not just retell it exactly how it is from the story. They have to think about it and put it in their own words in a summary. And then 5th grade, we expect them, because again, the text gets harder, they should be using quotes in both their writing and their reading. They can pull out exact quotes that defend their ideas. And 6th grade, you're citing textual evidence across more than one piece of information. So now you have 3 articles, and they're all about dolphins. This one's a fact, this one's sort of a fictional story. You have to pull out evidence from that to support whatever your statement is, whether it's a persuasive piece or just a fictional story, something like that. And it just goes up. 7th and 8th, we're really working on multiple perspectives or multiple articles. So they can't just read one article and say, this is the right answer. You might say, okay, here's a pro and a con on the topic. You need to pull out, and as Dave was saying, you need to be able to decipher what's accurate, what do you believe, based on what? Back up what you have to say. There might not be a right or wrong answer, but you have to back it up, or if it's an opinion piece. So that's kind of an idea how it's a very general standard, and they're all this general. Like I said, the math fluency is, they have to know their numbers, 0 to 5, 0 to 10, and it goes up by each grade level, but it doesn't tell you how. And each year, we just build on that same standard. So that's kind of what it looks like. And if you go on, the standards are on the website, and you can kind of spend some time looking at them and see what does my child in 3rd grade, what are they expected to do. And again, this is continued work with our staff as well. They're getting more and more comfortable with looking at different pieces of data and reading not only the papers in their own class, but for the entire grade, so that they can start to see how is this child doing, where are they struggling, are they able to meet the standard. Does anybody want to ask any questions of that one? Yes? There is a standard for conventions, and it's under 4 to 6. So under reading, and well, it's more under writing. It depends which one. Spelling is actually under writing, and grammar and vocab is mostly under the writing standards, and there's conventions. So if you look under those, that's where you'll find. And it really ranges because it's more on using more advanced vocabulary than the actual spelling. In the younger grades, it's on phonological awareness, phonemic awareness. When they get to 3rd grade, it starts to be on how much you use the vocab to enrich your writing, more than about can they identify CV, consonant, vowel, consonant words. There are questions, and when they score the part, they do look at conventions, but they weigh spelling less than grammar and vocab. So, and I'm trying to remember if we have, do we have spell check on that last year? We did have spell check. I'm trying to remember, I know that was always up in the yeah, I'm trying to remember too. So we're still working on the word work part. Is one of those that is really good to have a discussion. Should have a pass just on word work, because that's sort of a local decision, and it's a challenging one because we're very much up against what they see on TV, what they even read incorrectly in books, like author's license. And there's a lot of research that shows that once you see it wrong, it takes like 10 times to read. The signs that they drive on the roads, and it's like they want to be cute, and they put like car corral, and then they make it with K's instead of C's. Once they see that, it takes 10 times to undo it. So you have to constantly reinforce, because it goes right onto your brain in the part that they've seen it wrong, and now they have to undo it. And it's even more difficult if the student has a learning disability. It's like 20-something times that they have to unsee it to redo it right before they undo that. When they text to each other, they have a whole other language that they use, and we have to battle against. No, that's really not how you spell it. In your writing, you can't write you just a U. You have to write Y-O-U. And for many of them, it's a shocker. And if you give them a task like you're writing to the teacher, okay, you're writing to a friend, they write the same thing, totally differently. They'll write to a friend, and a letter to a friend looks totally different than if you write to a business, because they're starting to realize that there's different ways of communicating English. So we have to tell them, this piece is to write to an adult or an older peer audience, and then they seem to do a little bit better. If you say write it to your neighbor, you see all sorts of text. But it would be a really good conversation for future passes, because spelling, grammar, and vocabulary are always a challenge. It is a challenge. Do you do a traditional spelling, which we've seen does not have the benefit? They can memorize the spelling words, and then they use them in their writing, and they're all wrong. It's not carrying over. So we're always trying to find ways, systems and programs to get it to stick. It's a tough one. But I'm always open for that discussion and input. Any other questions or comments? The other thing I wanted to bring up was about math, because the other two terms we've heard about is what is meant by rigor. That's another one that's constantly being used all over. What is rigor? More rigorous curriculum, more rigorous word. I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. It should not mean more work, like more assignments. And it also should, like, you shouldn't get 40 math problems of the same type instead of 20. And it doesn't mean that you just give them a longer word problem that takes them longer to decipher. It doesn't mean that you give them an essay every single night instead of one essay a week. That's not what the intent is. The intent is that you ask them a question that's worthy of being answered, right? That it's a deeper question that's not just tell us the life and times of King Arthur, that you actually take a better topic, a question about either some of the decisions that he made or the life, and then actually have them write about it and use maybe some research in it, some text, and so that it's actually more meaningful, more challenging skills. I don't doubt that it's being interpreted the other way. And so we have to really watch if you're seeing that in our schools to let us know. But they should not be coming home with more homework than they did in the past. That's really not the intent. Like, please do 50 math problems. Rigor includes 3 things. One of them is the conceptual understanding. And for these are just 3 examples I took from math. But you're supposed to, the 3 things you're blending together in equal amounts, and that's conceptual understanding. You truly have a good number sense. Really understand why fractions are fractions and how they work together because they're parts of numbers. Not that you memorized that you to multiply, you just inverse and multiply. It's not that. You don't memorize the formulas. You understand why you would ever want to use that and how you do it. You balance that with procedural skills and fluency. So that's, you teach them how to answer the problems in multiple methods, so that they can do a long division problem, or they can add the things, whether they're adding it from left or right, whichever, doesn't make a difference, but they're actually able to do the computation. And with fluency. So fluency is back, it is important. It's not a large part. On a report card, it's like 1 out of, I think, 7 or 8 components on the report card. It's just one piece that we look at, that can kids pull numbers, facts, their math facts from their long-term memory. We don't practice it all the time, and we don't, it's a minute assessment that we do. We collect the data once a quarter and look at it. Yes?
I'm sorry,
That's it.
Please do. Don't ask, sorry, but when you say about the methods,
Yes.
different methods to the same answer.
Yes.
I guess it's important also for the kids to learn all the different methods because they can be useful. I mean, I don't mind if they are also evaluated on the same difficult, in the different kind of methods to the same answer because it will give them more ways to think, how to think, to solve problems. So it's just my opinion about the teaching. I love that they teach them about rounding and about mental math and about calculations because it's given a way to think about.
I think that you make a really important point, because we also don't know which method is right for each child. And for some of us, the method that we learned might have worked, but I can guarantee there were probably students around us it did not work for, and maybe even yourself or people close to you, that did not work. Like you weren't great at algebra, and you weren't great at geometry. But that doesn't mean you couldn't have been if it weren't explained to you or you had a different way of doing it.
So they have to, everybody has to understand the different methods because for certain kind of problems, you use the addition, the long kind of addition, 18 plus 18, and you do the long. But you can also do rounding when you have to write a check. I mean, when you get older, things like that. So I don't mind with the kids writing a check. You have to add like a 2 plus. Yes. So you know how whoever you have. So I was talking to my daughter today. Hey, tell me how, tell me what 98 plus 163 is difficult. And I'm pretty sure she started to do it in a long way. She had a pencil and a pen and a paper. She was adding every digit and everything, and I say, this is a good opportunity to think about rounding. 98 rounding to 100, then you take away the 2. So it's why controversy to teach the different methods is important. Different
way they learn. It's sort of like trying to figure out the book. But the biggest probably change is K-2, because we spent 3 years on number sense. But I can promise you, when they get to 3 through 5 and they do fractions and decimals, our kids are doing way better. Like they understand why they're doing that. Even though it feels like, oh, we're still doing adding and subtracting for 3 years, we're building that number sense. And even my oldest son did not go through that. He went through very traditional. My youngest, who's now in 3rd grade, only had multiple methods of going through Common Core. And what he understands as far as number sense, it just absolutely amazes me. Like he's like, oh, I know it's this because blah, blah, blah. I think because we're starting with them younger, that it seems like a long time on one main topic, but number sense, if you build a good number sense, it's the strongest foundation you can do. And I promise you, it speeds up. Trust me, it speeds up. The high school has 11 different math courses in 11th and in 12th grade. There's so many courses to take that they'll get it, I promise you. Once they get up there, they'll have so many. In our own middle school, we have now 9 choices in math. And there's a lot of choices that kids can take. But right now, we just try so hard to get that foundation, and then they'll have those choices. That's our plan. So procedural skills and fluency, and the last one is application. That the word problem piece, and that we didn't really have much as kids ourselves. We didn't do a lot of word problem solving. In fact, we tried to avoid them. I remember getting them and people asking, do we have to do that word problem, the last question? Trust me, our students did that too. They're like, do we have to do the word problem? That's probably the most important problem on the page. Knowing that we're bringing all those together equally. So we do spend time on application, we do spend time on fluency and procedure, and on the understanding piece. Bringing that all together means rigor. That's the definition for us. The other one I think that people keep hearing a lot about is close reading. And not to be conceived with the word close, C-L-O-Z-E. Close reading is when you're reading and you cover a word up with your child, but they try to figure out what the word is. I mean, it's a method of teaching reading to see if they're comprehending, cover up a word, and see if the student can substitute a word in it. So a lot of times people, when we say close, they think it's that. It's not. Close reading, and what it is not also. It doesn't mean repeating and repeating the same thing. That's another thing about misinterpretation. Some schools, I remember seeing, if you go online and you Google close reading, you'll have high school kids that write this whole nasty, tech email on there saying how much they can't stand close reading because their teacher made them read the same novel 4 times from different perspectives. That is not what is intended. You're supposed to look at the text from different angles. You're like, well, what do you think this character was thinking? What do you think this character was thinking? It doesn't necessarily mean you read the whole book and then okay, now read it again for this perspective. But and I think it's probably more common than not, that people were interpreting that you just keep reading the same article over and over. That's not really what it's about. Close reading is you're analyzing the information and you're looking at it, not just for the words, the enjoyment of it, but at school we're using it to understand and to think. So it's not just about leisure reading, it's really about thinking about the words on the page, what did the author mean, what is the character thinking, how does the setting and the plot play a role in that? That's what it means by close. Not just reading it for enjoyment on the beach, but really looking and thinking about why would the author put it, stopping and actually discussing with a group or with your teacher individually, putting in a post-it note saying, I had a thought there, I'm wondering why this character chose to move out of the town. And they put a sticky note, and then when they get with their group, they bring it up and say, I wonder why, they wanted to do that. So it's kind of thinking more of characters as people and real decision making. So it's really all about critical thinking. So don't be scared off by close reading. We really are asking questions about why and when and what they would do. It's really about thinking and not about reading. And that's really what my presentation is for tonight. But I wanted to hear questions from you. What's your thought? Where we're going?
Refresh my memory,
Yep.
the evaluations going to be all grades this year? Or is there a whole?
5th grade still has letter grades. So right now it's been rolling up.
I'm sorry, I meant the standardized evaluations, not your.
Oh, Clark?
Yeah.
Still 3rd through 8th. 3rd through 8th, and then the high school takes biology. So whenever they take biology, whatever year it is, they have to take a biology test. Whenever they take Algebra 1, they have to take the Algebra 1 assessment, and then there's language arts 1 that you have to pass by in the year 2018 to graduate. That's the same thing. So for us, it's 3rd through 8th grade. 3rd grade's a baseline, and then every year we look to see how they grow. And from how they did last year to the next year, we compare the scores. So this year, it's a baseline. You will get a growth score if your student was 4th grade or higher. And all they're doing is, you remember how they do the growth is ranking. So everybody in the state that scored, the same score they did, they're basically looking at how well did they do when they did the NJS, how did they rank? Now when they took the park, how did they rank? Even though it's different tests, it's apples and oranges, but they're not comparing scores. They're just saying, how did you rank? But remember, it's a baseline. Take it for what it is the first year. I know you, go ahead. In class or on the park? It is graded on a rubric. So they look at conventions and they look at written expression, how well you are able to express your thoughts in a coherent way. And then the third piece is how you use evidence from the article. What we've gone away from, there was sort of a swing when people started, when we did close reading, it started to become about how the individual reader felt. Like all these text-to-text or self-to-text connections. I like reading this book because it made me think of the time I went to grandma's. And so it really became this whole thing, we were losing the book. That wasn't the point of reading the book, but it really became popular. That's what everyone was doing. And I even heard teachers would say, and in the news I see it, if you don't have a connection, just make one up. Well, you just totally lost the whole purpose of that. So they completely got away from, it's not really what you think. We don't really want to know what you think. We want to know, can you pick out what the author thinks? Can you pick out, so it's more about the piece than it is about, do you understand the piece, not can you make a connection to it. But I'll tell you that there was a few years there, the whole movement became, all the kids were trying out, I went to my grandma's, and I played ball once, and then somehow we totally lost what we were doing here. There's nothing to do about that. And you can take 20 minutes of every kid going, I did that, and I did that, and we lost the whole point of analyzing the character and the plot and the purpose of reading the book. So now we're back to the other, and that's really what the part number. That's how it's scored. I can't wait to get them back, so a couple more weeks. Waiting. They keep bumping it. It's supposed to be, Thanksgiving. Yeah.
When that happens, like at about 3rd grade, when you start reading something at the whole school book report, so when you start reading something and then writing something about what you've read, is that like 3rd grade?
For the standards, it is 3rd grade. But I can tell you that our kindergartens, 1st and 2nds do it as well, but maybe not by writing it. They do a lot of turn and talk and discussion. They do post-its or small jots, but maybe not full. The first year we do what I would consider, we call it the baby literary essay. It's a very basic, starting to put paragraphs together is 3rd grade. And they do a unit on that in 3rd grade. Before that, some kids are ready. Teachers will say, you know what, here's, show them on the side. Here's some way you could organize it. For the most part, it's discussion and post-its and, as a whole class putting up their ideas. But it's shocking to me, sometimes when I go in and listen to the kindergarten and 1st graders, the stuff they come up with, I'm like, no, which grade, what class am I in? How can they come up with these thoughts? We underestimate them, I think, a lot. I think they can do more than we realize. If you put it in a way that's interesting to them. Plus, in the primary grade, they just want to learn everything. Everything is cool to them. They like taking tests. You say, we're doing math, like, yay, we're doing high fluency. They're like, all right, anything.
I know my son now gets annoyed if there's not a lesson or a poem or anything. He's like, what was this story? Right.
If you don't have older ones, it does die off. Just to warn you. They don't like to. My 6th grade tests are no good. But 5th grade, but before that, they kind of, I don't know, makes them feel like big kids. I'm taking the test. Other thoughts? On the side, yeah.
I had one daughter before.
Uh-huh. how it's changed, how writing and grading writing has changed. And the last one of the year, or I guess that's in March, is on the reading and writing workshop. And teachers will be here to really show you how they do it, which will surprise you. But what they have been learning is that we look at the pieces. Kids are writing every day, so they just write. It isn't so much about the piece as much as because they evolve. As they're moving through the pieces, then the teacher can look for specific things that the student is doing well and that they're struggling with. Sometimes she'll pull 3 or 4 kids with, like on a particular topic, if they're having difficulty having an opening, if their openings aren't strong to their writing. Then we'll pull a few kids together and have like a mini lesson, just that, to go over that piece where the other students might not be struggling. The other is that they're able to just go one-on-one and immediately sit down and never even read their piece and actually find things. So right now, this Readers and Writers Workshop, all the training we've been doing is training teachers to do it on the spot, to actually look at the piece and be able to pick out meaningful things to tell a student advice to improve their writing. Then they say, like, now each and every day I expect that you will still do this. So the next day they're writing a new piece, and the teacher looks to see, are they incorporating those things that we discussed the day before? So it's not the same as when they do editing, like grammar, spelling, and conventions. But what the teacher will be looking for, specific skills that student should have in narrative writing, specific skills they should have in that grade level for info writing. It takes time for them. They've really been working hard at learning. They came in the summer. They've been going to Teachers College Columbia for 8 hours at a time for an entire week. Many of our teachers have been going so far. We've set several grade levels to go up to Teachers College for one-day workshops. We have a few more coming up. But it's evolving how they assess. We also built into those collaborative times. So in K to 5, those teachers meet twice a week, every single week, to take the student pieces and to help each other. To how do you what do we learn from these pieces? Okay, what do you see from these pieces? What do I need to teach my class? And they work with our literacy coach. So she goes in and teaches them how to comprehend. I mean, it's really been phenomenal. She'll actually sit behind them and whisper in their ear. They turn to each other and they practice conferring, like on a student piece, and she'll be in their ear whispering, like, okay, you say this is how you would, this is what you would pick out, this is what you would say. So I think that collaborative time is probably making the biggest difference in their ability to change student reading and writing.
Because I see that in the classroom, and I see when I go to the report with the parent-teacher conference,
Yep.
you see how they evolve and how the teacher really builds over the writing of the children. But it's just that specific, just referring to that kind of specific homework that I don't really know if the teacher has the time to go through that and really also include that part as she is working to review it as the same way in the same way that she's doing in the classroom.
Well, that's definitely something we could look at, and maybe a good discussion of, that we could have in our collaborative time. Like, how are you doing that? Are they feeling like they're able to keep up with that load and give the feedback? I mean, because again, assignments are purposeless unless you give feedback. It's purposeless.
Exactly.
Unless you give the feedback. So I'll look into that and see that Mrs. Garopolis, she sits in on many of the collaborative meetings, can bring that to our teachers as well. Thoughts? Please know you can email me at any time if any questions come up. But I do appreciate you continuing to attend. Bring everyone to the park meeting next time. Hopefully we get those reports back. I'm very anxious. And don't be alarmed by this English mistake. We're always smart. So I'm not. All right. Thank